Fear is not always loud. It does not always scream or shake or rattle the foundations of our lives. More often than not, it moves in silence. It acts like a shadow slipping beneath the surface of our choices, influencing how we behave, what we suppress, and what paths we dare or fail to pursue. Fear is the silent architect of our daily existence. It shapes our relationships, our career moves, our inner dialogues, and our outward expressions. And it does so while wearing many disguises: safety, caution, logic, even responsibility. We tend to identify fear with obvious things: fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of rejection. But deeper than these surface-level anxieties lies something more unsettling. It's the fear of seeing ourselves fully, the fear of acknowledging our deepest potential, our innate brilliance, and yes, our buried darkness. Carl Jung spoke to this phenomenon with piercing clarity. He argued that the most difficult, most terrifying journey is not into the world, but inward, into the soul. To accept oneself entirely, with no illusion and no mask, is the ultimate psychological and spiritual challenge. Think about it. How often do people stay in relationships that no longer serve them, simply because it feels safer than being alone? How many dreams are silenced before they are spoken, killed not by failure, but by the anticipation of judgment? And how many times do we avoid the very things that would liberate us, all under the guise of being realistic? These actions, these patterns, they are not rooted in logic. They are rooted in fear. And fear, when unconscious, becomes destiny. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a signal, a spiritual compass. It is the soul's way of saying there is more here. Look closer. This video is not about generic advice for getting over fear. It's an invitation to dive deeper into Jung's profound insights on fear, the shadow self, and the inner alchemy of wholeness. What if fear isn't something to fight? What if fear isn't your enemy, but your teacher? Carl Jung once said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." This quote holds a simple but revolutionary truth that fear is not an obstacle to avoid, but a pointer. It's not standing in your way. It is the way. Fear doesn't just show up randomly. It arises precisely where there is something valuable to be reclaimed. When you feel fear around taking a risk, making a change, speaking your truth, what you're really experiencing is the friction between your current self and a deeper potential trying to emerge. Let's consider an example. Imagine someone being offered a leadership position, a role that could elevate their voice and allow their gifts to be fully seen. And yet, they feel frozen. The fear kicks in. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? But this fear isn't about the job. It's about the transformation the role demands. It's about the death of the smaller self, the ego that finds comfort in staying hidden. The ego resists change. It resists growth. It wants the familiar, the controllable. And so fear steps in not as a sign to stop, but as a sign that something important is at stake. That's why one of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves when we feel afraid is this fear protecting me, or is it keeping me small? Sometimes fear really is there for a reason. Sometimes it is protective. But more often, especially in modern life, it's a relic of an older identity. It's the voice of your past trying to talk you out of your future. When we shift our perspective and see fear not as a wall, but as a messenger, everything changes. We move from avoidance to inquiry, from paralysis to purpose. To truly understand fear, we must understand what lies beneath it. And for Carl Jung, the key to that understanding was the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not inherently bad. It is simply the part of ourselves that we have exiled. These are the qualities, instincts, feelings, and drives that we learned were unacceptable too much, too sensitive, too ambitious, too angry, and so we buried them. Not because they were wrong, but because we were trying to survive. We repressed these parts to fit in, to be loved, to feel safe. But what happens to those rejected parts? They don't disappear. They wait. They fester. And eventually, they begin to speak. They speak in the language of fear. If you grew up in an environment where anger led to punishment, you may now feel fear anytime you need to assert a boundary. If you learned that being sensitive meant being weak, you may now feel fear when someone gets close to your heart. The traits you pushed away as a child now rise up as fear whenever life asks you to embody them again. Fear, in this context, isn't about weakness. It's about disconnection. The more we disown parts of ourselves, the more fear intensifies, not because we're broken, but because the psyche is trying to restore balance. The way out is not through denial, but through integration. Fear tells us not just what we hesitate to do, but who we are afraid to become. And the path to personal power begins when we stop rejecting those parts and start reclaiming them. Fear, when not understood, becomes insidious. It hides. It morphs. It doesn't always look like panic or dread. Sometimes it looks responsible. Sometimes it looks smart. And that's how it takes control. Fear can disguise itself as procrastination, telling you that now just isn't the right time. That maybe later, when you're more prepared, more polished, more perfect, then you'll start. It can show up as perfectionism, endlessly tweaking your work, refining your image, avoiding exposure by never truly finishing. It can become people-pleasing, putting everyone's needs above your own, afraid that being authentic will cost you love. Fear is a master of disguise. It often shows up as overthinking, a whirlwind of analysis and hypothetical outcomes that keeps you circling around action without ever taking it. It can even pretend to be logic, telling you that your dreams are impractical, your desires unrealistic. Jung warned us that one of fear's most dangerous masks is false realism. Because if fear can convince you that it's being rational, it can control your entire life while you believe you're simply being smart. This is why so many people live half-lives, not because they lack ambition, but because they mistake fear for wisdom. They never make that call, speak that truth, take that leap, not because they're weak, but because fear has camouflaged itself too well. To break free, we must recognize these masks. We must learn to discern when fear is actually wisdom and when it is self-abandonment in disguise. The path to fearlessness does not mean eliminating fear. It means learning to work with it, learning to listen to it, engage with it, and integrate what it reveals. Jung called this shadow work. It is the art of bringing what is unconscious into consciousness. It is the sacred labor of reclaiming what you've lost along the way. And like any real transformation, it starts with honesty. Step 1. Name the fear. Speak it aloud or write it down. Give it shape. I'm afraid of being seen as a fraud. I'm afraid I'm not lovable if I fail. When we name fear, we disarm it. What was once a vague, overwhelming sensation becomes specific, and specific fears can be worked with. Step 2. Trace its origin. Where did this fear begin? What event, what voice, what moment taught you that this part of you was dangerous or unacceptable? These fears are often rooted not in reality, but in the stories we absorbed as children. And recognizing the source is the beginning of rewriting the script. Step 3. Reclaim the rejected part. Whatever you disowned, your voice, your assertiveness, your creativity, begin to welcome it back. This is not a one-time act, but a daily practice. Start small. Speak up once. Create something just for you. Set one boundary. Each act builds self-trust. Each moment of embodiment tells your nervous system, it is safe now. Integration is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you learned to be afraid. And each act of reclamation is a return to your wholeness. Jung called the ultimate goal of this work individuation, the process of becoming your most authentic, integrated self. Not the self shaped by culture or ego or expectation, but the self that has always been waiting underneath. Fear shrinks in the light of wholeness. Because when all parts of you are welcomed, there is no longer anything to hide. There is no mask to maintain, no performance to uphold. You no longer fear being exposed because you are no longer fragmented. In this space, criticism does not shake you because you are no longer seeking permission. Failure does not destroy you because your worth is no longer attached to outcome. You move forward not from a place of bravado, but from deep inner clarity. And this clarity is the true antidote to fear. So how do we make this practical? How do we live it? Start with shadow dialogue. Each morning, journal with your fear. Give it a voice. Ask it what it wants. Acknowledge the parts of yourself that feel vulnerable or ashamed. Listening creates integration. Do daily micro dares. Take small, intentional risks that stretch you. Speak a truth. Say no, show up creatively. Each time you lean into discomfort, you teach your body that fear isn't fatal, it's a doorway. End your day with self-reflection. Ask, where did fear show up today? How did I respond? What would I do differently next time? This builds emotional awareness and resilience. Reconnect with your body. Fear lives in the nervous system. Use breathwork, cold exposure, movement, and stillness to create safety from within. Your body needs to feel the transformation, not just think about it. Fear is not here to destroy you. It is here to point you toward what matters. It surrounds your most sacred possibilities, your voice, your love, your power, your purpose. So stop asking, how do I get rid of fear? Ask instead, what is fear trying to show me? The ego wants to protect, but the soul wants to expand. And fear is the tension between the two. When fear arises, don't run. Don't numb. Pause. Ask it, what truth do you carry? And then step forward. Because freedom doesn't come from defeating fear. It comes from integrating it. If this message resonated with you, pause for a moment. Not to consume the next piece of content, but to ask yourself, where is fear showing up in my life right now? And what deeper part of me is waiting to be reclaimed through it? The journey you're on is not about becoming fearless. It's about becoming whole. And in that wholeness, fear no longer controls you. It becomes a guide, a mirror, a threshold to cross. Carl Jung didn't promise comfort. He offered truth. And in truth, there is liberation. If you're ready to explore more of these inner landscapes, fear, shadow, self-worth, and beyond, subscribe, share this video with someone walking a similar path, and leave a comment below. What fear are you ready to face now? Thank you for walking this road with me today. Until next time, honor your fear, follow its message, and trust the voice that's emerging from the shadows. Your journey inward is the beginning of everything.